I just want to tell you that, that we do have we have USG Book of the Dead, and it's very special. And these two have been. Thank you so much, Peter and Marney, for all you've been doing on this project.
Good morning. The church really filled up in the in the last few minutes. I looked back about 5 minutes of, and it was empty, and now look at it's full. Wonderful. As part of the 150th year celebration of the founding of USG, Peter and I were asked to begin the creation of a memorial book that would honor past and future deceased members. To compile the list, we searched through whatever records we could find: the membership book, the Memorial Fund book, files on memorial services, and others which had never been pulled together before. We eventually assembled a list of 150 names of members who had died since 1980. Eventually, we can go back earlier, but we had to cut it off somewhere. To date, we have been able to find information on 75 of these, such as orders of service, obituaries, newspaper articles, and photos, which we have organized into these memorial books. However, this effort is a work in progress. It is by no means complete. Our goal is to make the list as complete as possible and have meaningful information about each of our dear friends who are no longer with us. For this, we need the help from all of you. If you find that a member is not on the list, please provide us with the right information. For those listed, please add any additional information you may have, including personal remembrances, as well as obituaries, orders of service, articles, and photos. You can give it to Peter or me, or leave it in the church office, which now has a 150th mailbox. The books will be on display in a yet-to-be-determined place in the church. Today, they are here for you to look at on the table beside the exit door over here. This project has become very meaningful to us as we continue to learn more about the amazing lives of these members and friends we remember so fondly. We think you too will be touched as you listen to Kent's remarks this morning and see some of the pictures that have been selected. Please help us to continue to update this project so that each member is appropriately honored. During the next musical interlude, we will honor 150 deceased members by projecting their names on the screen. I want to say thanks to Gloria and Sarah Spath for putting together this PowerPoint presentation. And a special thanks to Peter, especially for his attention to detail and follow-through, honed over 40 years of writing grants for the NIH.
Needless to say, on a project like this, we can't even come close to mentioning all the folks who have done so much good for the congregation and the wider community. So today is just a small taste. And I really want to thank Peter and Marney. This text is predominantly theirs. Jenn Leiby helped with some editing, and we know that it's just not in any shape or form inclusive. But here are some community leaders who have blessed our congregation in the past. Elizabeth Charles was in leadership with the YWCA for a number of decades at a time when women especially deserved and needed more resources for sports and leadership development. Elizabeth Madera was a longtime member of the Board of Trustees of the Germantown Boys and Girls Club and donated a gorgeous stained glass window for our sanctuary. Alan Dawley was a professor of history and a social activist. Alan created the College of New Jersey Center for the Study of Social Justice. He won the prestigious Bancroft Prize in History Writing for his first book entitled Class and Community in '77. Subsequently published 3 other books. He served on the board of Weaver's Way Co-op and West Mount Airy Neighbors. Al and Flora Lisi were prominent liberal social activists and educators. They were leaders in Women's International League for Peace and Justice, were founding members of Weaver's Way Co-op, and longtime involved leaders in the co-op nursery school. Edelira Kinzer was an elementary school teacher in Philadelphia for 40 years, an organist and choir master in several churches. Edelira founded and directed the Songsters Unlimited, a 50-member chorus of senior adults at the Center in the Park. She was very active in the civil rights movement and received the National Unsung UU Award for her work in the denomination. For Edelira's memorial, there was more UUA brass in the building than any time in my ministry. Eversley Vaughn, an advocate for city neighborhoods and efforts ranging from integration to school improvement. He was the president of the Philadelphia Council of Neighborhood Organizations. Eversley helped form the East Mount Airy Neighbors, which combated white flight of residents and established a community center with daycare programs, an adult school, and boarding home for the mentally retarded. Among tributes, Eversley received the City of Philadelphia Human Rights Award, the Jewish Community Relations Sylvia Cohen Award, and 3 times he won the NAACP Distinguished Service Award. Joseph Still Clark was elected in 1951 as the first Democratic mayor of Philadelphia since 1884. Among many attributes, Mr. Clark was lauded for reducing corruption in the city government. In 1956, he was elected United States Senator. He served 2 terms, leading in civil rights, congressional reform, and early strong criticism of the Vietnam War. Joseph Watlington, Jr. served in the United States Army in the U.S., Europe, and Africa during World War II. Back in Philadelphia, Joseph was an insurance broker and effective booster of city economic development. Joseph was chair of Philadelphia Allied Action Commission, an anti-poverty organization. He was chair of the Afro-American Museum for 6 years in the 70s, director of the Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce, and the Philadelphia Convention and Visitors Bureau. Germantown Citizens Council named him an outstanding citizen in 77, and he received the city's Liberty Bell Award in 79. Judge Ethan Allen Doty served over 66 years in law and nearly 40 years as a judge on Common Pleas Court. A Reform Democrat, Judge Doty believed strongly in the principles of Roosevelt and Truman. At Temple University, he was a member of the executive committee of the board, and at one time he was president of the Alumni Association. And Temple played a great football game last night. Heart. The Tuskegee Airmen were a group of African-American military pilots, fighter and bomber, who fought in World War II. During World War II, black Americans in many U.S. states were still subject to Jim Crow laws, and the American military was racially segregated, as was much of the federal government. In that context of discrimination, the Tuskegee Airmen were the first African-American military aviators in the United States Armed Forces. 3 members of the Unitarian Society of Germantown were members of the Tuskegee Airmen. This includes George H. Kidd III and Oscar W. Gibbs Jr., both deceased, and our wonderful living member, Bertram A. Levy. George H. Kidd III was a highly regarded aerospace physiologist who researched ways to help pilots withstand stress in the cockpit. Dr. Kidd spent a career of 34 years in U.S. naval research as a team leader. He served as a pilot himself in the Army Air Corps. He also taught physiology department at University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine. For his work, Dr. Kidd was honored with the first Aerospace Award of the National Medical Association. He was president of our church for 2 terms. Oscar Woodward Gibbs attended the U.S. Air Force Officers Candidate School, where he received his commission as lieutenant. Upon his discharge from the military, Oscar earned his master's degree from Harvard, and his professional career in education began in Philadelphia, where he taught elementary school for many years. We've had many members possessing talents as artists, writers, and musicians. James Gordon Long was a professional writer in public relations and advertising, and he was a poet who published a humorous book of poetry entitled Footsteps. For example, this poem on aging, entitled Confession. I'm aging rather gracefully. I manage this because I'm not the man I used to be, but then I never was. Or this poem on religion, entitled Eye Contact. Work for it, the pros advise. Our pastor does. Lord knows he tries to catch our eyes in sermons, but it's hard for him when mine are shut. Ruth Donnell was photographer and writer. She wrote 3 novels and abundant poetry. She was a committed environmentalist and photographer of nature. John Donnell was a professor of political science who specialized in Southeast Asian studies. He was an accomplished jazz pianist, sang in the choir here at USG. John and Ruth traveled widely taking pictures of the world and came back and gave slideshows of their award-winning work. Amy Rumsey Van Italy was an accomplished artist who endeared herself to many USG members by painting renderings of their houses and natural scenes around the world. We have Antarctica in my house, which she painted during her visit there. Doris Sturgeon, catch this one, people. Born in Japan to missionary parents in 1902, she lived to be over 100. In Japan, Doris and her sister became local celebrities by swimming around the base of Mount Fuji. There has to be some stories of that. She was an accomplished violinist, played music around the world during her husband's diplomatic career before she settled in Philly and taught music at local schools and conducted large choral groups. Margaret Peg Spigler sang for the Sweet Adelines, the Ambler Choral Society, and USG choir. She was curator of the Wharton Sinclair Estate, where she entertained many friends in elegant parties. We have great educators today and going all the way back. Deceased loved ones include Robert Hudgens West, was a professor at the Department of Sociology at Temple for 36 years. Bob had a deep love of teaching and found great satisfaction in the achievement of his students. Bob and his wife Sarah had the opportunity to teach in Temple's campus in Tokyo at one time. Earl Henry Spalding was professor and chair of Department of Microbiology at Temple School of Medicine. Earl designed the Spalding classification scheme, outlining the most effective chemicals for treatment of bacterial infections. And this led to significant reduction of infections in hospitals. Eula Saunders was an elementary school teacher for 25 years in Philadelphia and an activist in feminist, peace, and humanitarian causes. John Jack Shelley was a musician who played the violin, saxophone, and piano. He taught music in Philadelphia public schools for 44 years and especially enjoyed teaching visually handicapped students. Michael Mark Schumann was a talented keyboard musician and performer whose taste ranged from Chicago blues to jazz and classical. He died prematurely at 39. 6 USG members have died during the past year, since October 1st of 2014. Gary Bromberg was a successful commercial insurance broker for 40 years. Gary also became an accomplished artist, producing oil and acrylic paintings and metal sculptures resembling Paleolithic cave paintings. And he was a big brother constantly for 35 years. June Williams Burnley enthusiastically traveled the world and was an English teacher for the school district of Philly for many years. Joan Long was a high school art teacher. After retiring in '81 from Philadelphia Public Schools, Joan continued to make her own art and teach art classes for seniors. She published a book, Adventures in Brightest Africa, the story of her travels in Europe, Africa, and Asia with her 2 teenage sons. Georgia McWhinney was an educator, a reading specialist who earned her PhD at the age of 60. Her passion for emerging literacy in both children and adults, she gave talks on this throughout America and Europe. Sarah Sally Strybig was a teacher of physical ed in Philly Public Schools, Philadelphia High School for Girls. She was an avid sailor on the high seas. Charlotte McDowell Turner was a lifelong member of USG with her sister Barbara. Charlotte worked in the Department of Human Resource Services as a social worker and a program matching grandparent figures with foster children. She was politically active for her entire adult life, promoting civil rights and social justice. And finally, we lift up some of those who died too young. Nicholas Brown was the son of Ingrid and Bob Brown, brother of Christopher and Michael, and twin brother David. Nicky was born in 1968 and died tragically at the age of 17 in an automobile accident. Nicky was a break dancer who had deep empathy for reaching out and helping kids on the margins or who were ostracized. He was a helper his entire life. And in his memory, the Nicky Brown Scholarship Fund was established here at USG. Lady Sheeter Bonanno was born in Chile, South America in 1981. She and her brother Louis were adopted by longtime USG members Kathleen and David Bonanno. Lady died at the age of 21 at the hands of a murderer. Ladybug, her nickname given by her brother Lou, had recently graduated from nursing school, was looking forward to a life of service. Her smile and love of life were highly contagious. Jessie Bryant loved art, the movies, and friends. She loved participating in our youth group at the church. She died, sadly, at the age of 21 of cancer. Kevin Groves. Kevin Groves.
Kevin Groves was an active member and leader of the Friends of the Wissahickon. He was also a poet, penning these lines. When I am all caught up in the agenda and thinking about what is next, I forget that I can just sit in the grass and write in my journal.